Hello, all my lovely Patreons. We are once again diving into the muses. Today, we are going to be talking about Euterpe. Um, I think we only actually have Cleo left. So, next month might be our last month of our Hellenic paganism deep dive into the working with the muses. So, this month we are doing Euterpe. But before I jump into the presentation, again, I would just like to thank everybody who is on our Patreon. We also have now joined Substack and are starting a podcast. So we will be talking about these things also via that network as well. So it's very exciting. I love Hellenism, Hellenismo. I love teaching about how you can work with these wonderful, amazing deity to manifest your goals in your day to day life. So today we are going to jump into Euterpe. So let me figure out how to share my screen. Oh my goodness. All right. We are going to pull up the handy dandy PowerPoint that helps me stay on track in these little sessions that we have. All right. So, Euterpe. So she's a very unique muse. I saved her to the end because she does touch a lot of different areas in terms of magic, chanting, writing chants, your verbal or vocalization in spell crafting. I did do a series on this previously, but it was very Buddhist. It was, talking about tantric Buddhism, sacred words, sacred sounds, sacred syllables, and using mantras. And that video is on our YouTube for free if you guys want to check that out as a refresher. But with Euterpe, we talk about breath work, meditation, air magic. She is associated with astral projection. Now, I am doing a series on astral projection. We're doing a live Zoom group. We're kind of doing like this live group, effort to meet in the astral plane. So I'm going to very lightly touch on that because I'm doing a whole presentation on that next Friday, the 26th. You can still join if you're interested in being part of this group. It's $10 and that is posted on our Patreon. That is the only place where you can join the astral projection group. Energy healing, clairaudience, and clairaudience. I'm claircognizant. My daughters, though, Maddie and Lainey, who some of you have worked with, are clairaudient. That is definitely associated with Euterpe. Using music in spell work, that's a biggie. I've talked about that before, how that can really help amplify and, break through blockages too. And then musical inspiration, of course. So her symbols, typically you'll see her with the flute anytime you're looking at the old art depictions of the muses. She typically is the one with the flute. A lot of them have laurel wreaths, pan pipes, but the flute, that's Euterpe. All right. Boy, my face is big on this one. Okay. So, the Greek muse of music, song, and lyric poetry. She is known as the giver of delight. Very inspirational, as all the muses are. They're here to inspire us. But she inspired musicians with her melodies. Again, she always usually is seen with that double flute or holding a flute. It's just her symbol for manifestation in terms of music. Again, just like the other muses, she is associated to the fine arts, melodic creation, so writing. She was invoked by poets and musicians for divine creative sparks in their work. So when we look at her role, it is, again, just like the other muses, inspirational for musicians, poets, dramatists with creative energy. She brings joy through music and guides artists through their performances. Her influence did help shape the arts in ancient Greece, with artists invoking her for inspiration before creating work. Same with many of the muses, correct? So that's kind of old shoe for you guys at this point. I think this is our 8th month doing this. All right, so this is actually an old chant that I found that I wanted to share with you. It's O Euterpe, Muse of Sweet Music. This was actually used as an offering, a musical poetic offering to invoke her, to call her in. Typically it would be a working artist who was maybe in the middle of creating a piece of music, some piece of art. However, I mean, you can call her in for whatever your goal, beauty, glamour, influence, persuasion. She's here to inspire us. So, oftentimes back in the day, The individual doing this offering would maybe use a flute. Even if you don't know how to play a flute, that's okay. You can kind of play around with it. Or they would use photos of flutes or depictions of flutes while they kind of recited this chant to her to call her in. If you were to combine this chant with any kind of creative act, again, I use the example of, playing the flute or, having some depiction of the flute, but you could also, write something to her, paint something for her to invite her influence. You could paint a flute. Um, she does embody the feeling of inspiration itself, not just the act of creation. I always make that point with all of our muses. It's so much more than just being inspired to create something. It is the feeling, the energy of inspiration, because that has a much deeper, further reach for all of us. So save this. This is one of those old classical chants that have been used time and time again to call her in. We're not going to say it out loud because we're not calling her in. We're just kind of researching her today. All right, so let's talk about chants and writing chants. So that's the first wheelhouse that Euturpe is associated to. So the easiest way to really write an incantation is to break it down into three sections. The past, whatever the issue is, right? The present, what you're requesting or your petition, and the future. What is your intended outcome here? What are you desiring to see occur? This is the easiest way to write any kind of incantation that you're going to use in spell work. Again, words, we're talking about, sacred words. They deeply do affect everyone and everything around us. So when you're working on incantations, chants, affirmations, the words are powerful to a certain extent. So if you think about it, everything around us is comprised of vibrations. Everything vibrates, everything has a frequency, and words do too. So words, if they are the right frequency, the right vibration, do create results. So choosing our words carefully, taking time to do that. So, a lot of people think that, things need to rhyme. That's not always the case. You don't have to have your chants or your petitions rhyme. That's, Hollywood magic. But if you're one of these individuals that wants to use rhythm, adding rhythm to your spells can add power to your words, of course, and really it makes it easier for them to, be remembered, if anything. I find that when my petitions rhyme, they're easier to remember. That's probably more of an allure than the frequency vibration shift because I can accomplish that in other ways. But as long as your imagination and intention are in the right place, your words are going to follow. Incantations do allow you to use your imagination. You can also add a chant to your spell, which will help raise energy at any part of the spell. It doesn't have to be in the beginning as you're calling in. It doesn't have to be at the end when you're closing. It can be at any point. Chants are phrases, they're words, they're syllables repeated for a purpose. And, again, that goes back to the Buddhism presentation I did on mantras. A lot of people that walk that Buddhist path, tantric path, that, or even in, shamanism, when we're talking about Serbian shamanism, when we're talking about, Tibetan tantric, like the Tungasi, they use chant mantras quite often. So this is kind of in line with that. So when I think of Euterpe as a muse, I do think of her as a very Buddhist muse, a very almost, tantric muse, not on the same level as Orato, but definitely in terms of using those sacred mantras or the sacred terras, really, honestly. I think she is associated when we're talking about omnism. And we've talked before about how one deity can have many different reflections in the world. Kali Ma can be reflected as Saint Michael or the Orisha Oya. I believe that Euterpe can be reflected as the red or black Terra and vice versa. So again, keep an open mind. All right, let's move forward. All right, so first and foremost, the wording you use within your spell should kind of follow the same rules as your intention. You want it to be specific. You don't want it to be wishy-washy. You don't want to use words of worms. Well, I mean, maybe you're using worms in your spell, but you don't want to use words that are kind of like vague desires, hopes, wishes, wants. You want to be very, very specific. You want the words to be precise yet open. So you want you want the specifics, but you should be able to say what you want in just a few words and leave the ending open enough to receive even something better. You don't want to shortchange yourself either. Words should be positive. Always use positive language over negative. You don't want to use words like not, won't, don't, can't, because then you're already setting the stage for the creation of blockage or allowing that blockage to have power over your energetic push. You always want it to be personal. So use I, me, or if you're a third party caster like myself, I'm going to use the other person's name or the names associated with that cast. And keep it reasonable. Some things just aren't attainable, and that's okay. So always, keep it pretty reasonable. I've had clients before that have asked for things that, I've said to them, I applaud your desires here, but we need to bite-sized pieces and cycle up. You can't become a multi-billionaire overnight. Well, I mean, you can, but let's be realistic with energy. I always say keep a little bit of realism in here with your petitions. Otherwise, you're kind of setting yourself up for disappointment. Always in short blocks. You can be that billionaire, but you need to start somewhere and you need to work up towards that. If your petition is just to wake up in the morning with $1 billion in your bank account, you're probably going to be disappointed, right? So, for many spells, the wording you use can and should be your intention and nothing more. You can write it, chant it in your mind, chant it out loud, sing it, scream it, whatever you feel is best for the work you are doing. There are, however, times when you maybe want to use more than your intention in a spell. Like for myself, I use compounds, especially if you're working with deity or ancestors, very specific pantheons that you're calling in. So those are ingredients that aid in the work or are part of more of an elaborate ritual or cast, and that's fine. Keep your words, I don't want to say keep them short and sweet, but you kind of want to keep them short and sweet. You don't want to be spending 20 minutes chanting. That can sort of, unless it's building energy for something, it can create a little bit of a confusing navigable path for that energy you're releasing in that more elaborate ritual. So the point isn't valid during these times, meaning short and sweet, but more than your intention is needed. So yes, state the thing, but also focus on the task at hand, the compounding at hand. I hope that makes sense. Boy, I'm a little tired today. I'm sorry, you guys. I feel like I'm out of it a little bit, but I'm here. I just think that um it is so windy here. If you guys heard the wind, of course, Zoom is great for blocking out background noise, but I'm on the 21st floor and it is so loud, the wind. So I'm a little bit off as I'm doing my presentation today, and I apologize for that. Anyway, going back to chanting here, figure out what wording you would use to best convey your intention within your spell. So using 4 examples here that you can play with. I want to pay off all my bills and buy a mansion, right? I hope I get a new job. I wish he loved me. I don't have to go without. So obviously you can see right off the bat, there's some words in here we shouldn't be using, right? Um, and then think about ingredients you may use in spells like this. Do you want to include those in your wording? Do you want it to rhyme? Will rhyming change the overall intention? Would prose be better? So here's some examples for you to play with. A nice little activity. How would you word it? What kind of ingredients would you use? And how would you, because these are very common. There's a reason why I picked these are the 4 most common things I hear. And we need to focus it on very specific intentions. I wish he loved me is not going to create an energetic bridge that has love and devotion attachments. He loves me, right? That's very specific. That is attached to the result of the outcome that you want. And so anyway, the point is play with this. By the time you finish this activity, you should have laid the groundwork for at least these 4 spells, right? That you'll likely use more than once in your lifetime. It does take practice, and over time, you're going to find that some things work really well for you and other things don't. And that's the way it is with everything in life, right? Just because I like to use certain ingredients or like compounds with my wording doesn't mean that that's going to work for you. And I've said it once and I'll say it again, go with your gut, trust your intuition. No two casters are the same. You don't have to do it the exact same way somebody else does. You need to do it the way that works best for you. And that is through a system of trial and error, So play with these four statements, turn them into petitions that are specific, that check all the boxes that we talked about. And then you have those in your wheelhouse to use whenever you need to use them. All right. Okay, so astral projection. I'm not going to jump too deep into this because, like I said, we have that live Zoom, the 26th, with our astral projection group. But Euturpe is connected to astral projection, especially spells that are designed specifically for this type of liminal space work. So, astral projection is very common in esoteric traditions across the board, lots of different cultures. They call it different things. It's the same thing. The aim is to separate consciousness from the physical body, allowing your astral body to travel planes, often linked by a silver cord. Now, in real world practices or quote unquote spells, this involves deep meditation, guided visualizations, affirmations, and rituals using herbs and sigils to achieve that OBE, that intentional out of body experience, or lucid dreams. And, that does have a focus on energy work and intention. So traditional methods do involve mental focus, relaxation, and very specific techniques to shift awareness. I'll be teaching a lot of that in our astral travel group. Now, we have been doing a dream tending group, say that 3 times fast, on Zoom for quite some time now. And as part of our dream tending group, we have deep dived into ancestral dreaming, visitation dreaming, liminal space magic, dream altars, the sigils that we can use for our dream work practice. And so this is kind of an extension of that, but very powerful. Excuse me. So there are spells that free the spirit from the body, creating an astral duplicate that travels the astral plane. The astral form does stay tethered to the physical body, usually by a silver cord, or at least that's how I walk my participants through it, which returns the spirit when the spell ends or when the session ends or that liminal space is closing. Activating an innate ability for intentional out of body travel, which is referred to as OBE, is really common there's a lot of spells that kind of are designed to accomplish that. So meditation and visualization, using deep relaxation, energy expansion, and focusing on shifting consciousness. Mantras, again, or sigils, using specific words or symbols to enhance focus. There are rituals. They often involve specific herbs like, astral travel oils, candles, sacred items that are usually offered by energy workers that have been charged to a specific frequency. Lucid dreaming, it's a technique that, bridges into dream states to trigger projections. Safe space. I can't stress this enough. When we talk about astral travel, we always need to talk about safe spaces, ensuring your physical body is secure and undisturbed. Making sure your intentions are clear, positive, that's crucial for successful projection. And then relaxation, which is probably one of the hardest things, right, in today's day and age. Deep relaxation and focus are also key to moving beyond normal waking consciousness. So Euturpe is a muse that you can work with for your astral projection goals. I wanted to give you kind of a general overview of what astral projection is if you haven't heard of it before. But again, we have a live Zoom group that is very specific for this. So I just wanted to kind of, because I have to do so much with this, I didn't want to spend too much time today. There are other things with Euturpe that we could talk about, but this is something in her wheelhouse, just so that you guys are all aware. She is a deity you can work with for astral travel. So air magic. I love air magic. Okay, so air magic, there is magic in the air. Yes, there is. Air magic spells usually involve manipulating wind, our breath, atmosphere for the goals of communication, travel, clarity. They do usually involve incantations. Again, this is Euturpe's wheelhouse. There is a lot of correlating interconnected features here. They usually involve visualization, physical actions like deep breathing or moving in nature. These spells usually focus on themes of freedom, again, intellect, change, And then just utilizing air's natural qualities for all sorts of, helpful effects in our day-to-day life. So let's dive into air magic here. I spent a little more time on this topic for you guys today. All right, so when we talk about air magic, let's talk about what that is and what it looks like. So it can be weather magic, conjuring clouds, controlling temperature, summoning storms. There's a lot of connective elements with air magic where we use it for connection. And we do that by actually feeling air, right? And it just kind of gets complicated to explain, but feeling the wind, watching clouds, listening to wind chimes, flying kites, hiking in mountains, those are all forms of air magic. You can manifest in those situations. Mindfulness, deep breathing exercises, visualization, seeing air flowing through you, meditation on sounds, sound and music is part of air, the elements of air. Actions, a lot of times we work with air magic when we're starting new things, we're planning travel, or we're in the midst of traveling. I find for me, I read a lot. I'm a bibliophile, and when I read a really inspiring book, I feel that triggers my air magic, my ability to manifest through air. Using positive affirmations. Every time I go to yoga, or if you prefer dance or trance dance, we talked about that last month. That triggers your ability to tap into air manifestation. So again, the wind on your face, gentle bird songs in the morning. That's one thing I've always loved my whole life is hearing the birds early in the morning. Fluffs of clouds passing through the sky. That wonderful release of taking a long, deep breath. These are all sources of air magic, right? The air is connected with the mind, intellect, creativity, freedom. It's the very element that allows us to take breath and live, right? It allows us to live. Air magic is literally all around us each and every day. We can't see it, but it is always there for us to tap into. And I probably think that this is the one element that is taken the most for granted, right? Because air energy exists all around us as well as within us. This energy is associated with light, spring, newness, sound. And so including this element into your day, in a very mindful and purposeful way, not only are you going to feel more in tune with the world around you, but also with your inner world. It is a balancing element. So air cannot be seen, only felt, and is a vital element to all life. And without it, we would simply perish. So there's a lot of power here, right? That's the point I'm trying to drive home. All right, let me move my little box out of the way. So, standing in the wind and just appreciating it, right? Burning incense during your magical workings, getting lost in a beautiful piece of music. These are all ways to tap into air magic. Um, there are many easy and fulfilling ways for us to connect with that air energy as we go about our days. We just need to open our minds and be aware that we are doing it. It's the awareness that triggers activation that gives us power to route energy, right? So let's talk about some air magic correspondences. Um, Usually the direction is east. The energy is very projective. It is associated with the spring season. The time of day association is usually dawn. It is attached very closely to our olfactory, which is our sense of smell and our hearing. The throat chakra, yellow, white, and blue are the color associations. In terms of tools that we may use during an air magic ceremony or ritual, usually it's going to be wands. I like to call them little hand swords, altar swords, or full swords, honestly. Animal associations, bees, blackbirds, eagles, hawks, ravens, wren. Zodiac signs, of course, Aquarius, Libra, and Gemini. There's a lot of air magic association with those three particular signs. Ruling planets, Mercury, Jupiter, and Uranus. So if you do astrophysical magic, if you use astrology and magic, definitely you'll be working with Mercury, Jupiter, and Uranus. When we're looking at plant life, and I bring up plant life because if you compound, if you're a root worker, and you make compounds for your cast, for your sacred firework, the typical elements that you're going to include could be from this list. And again, this is for tapping into the vibration and frequency of air manifestation. So dill, lavender, frankincense, myrrh, lemongrass, poplar, rosemary, peppermint, probably my favorite, peppermint, fennel, caraway, poppy, dandelion, and yarrow. I actually had years ago a recipe for dandelion wine on one of my channels. I don't remember which one, but it was really popular. And I used to use dandelion wine when I was doing air elemental rituals. So it's just, a very nice frequency contributor is what I call it. Gemstones. So topaz, smoky quartz, sapphire, kyanite. Kyanite is also a dream stone. That is a stone or a crystal that we use on dream work altars for astral travel. So it fits in nicely with this muse and her affiliations to magic. Deities, of course, the goddesses, Urania is here. She's another muse. Euturpe, of course, we're talking about her today, but Hathor, Juno, Hera, the gods, Thor, Mercury, Uranus, Zeus, Dagda. I mean, there's a lot of associations here in in Roman Greek pantheons and outside of them. So, we have Norse paganism here. We have lots of different wheelhouses we can tap into with Euterpe, right? Again, I'm omnistic, I'm polytheistic. I very oftentimes will blend my Norse pagan pantheon with my Hellenic pagan pantheon, my muses with my Norse deity, and bring them together, and we make magic. So that is something that can be done. Don't think, there's nothing more frustrating to me than hearing people say, well, you can't do that. Well, why not? Why can't you? I don't get it. When I leave my apartment, am I only supposed to talk to people or interact with people that look like me? No, I don't want that. I want to talk and interact with everybody. So just keep an open mind. All right, moving forward. Ooh, it's dry in here. It's that wind. Hang on. All right, types of air magic rituals to perform. Again, I'm just kind of keeping it very simple for you guys. If you're working spells or goals that involve travel, freedom from restriction, like maybe you're trying to move out of your parents' house, knowledge. If you're in school, you have a test coming up. Communication, we always need help with communication, right? With our loved ones, with our boss, with our peers. Mental clarity, if you're trying to sharpen your intuition, your psychic abilities. If you are working on a creative endeavor, maybe you're creating a musical piece or a painting of some sort, or a drawing or a writing, maybe you're writing a short story. These are all things that would work well in terms of air magic to help manifest those goals. So, very simple things, you guys. You can start manifesting by just getting your mind in the right frequency, right? So again, standing out in the wind, cloud watching, flying kites. I like to do, and you guys probably seen this. I think I put it on my channels a few months ago. It was just this last summer, the Water Lantern Festival. Now, of course, it's using the elements of water, but switch it to kites. Writing your goals and your visions for the future on a kite and flying that kite, right? Releasing it to the wind. Getting up at dawn, putting a bird feeder out, burning incense, performing visualizations or meditations, hanging up wind chimes. Wind chimes are magic, you guys. Practicing deep breathing. Going to movement practices like yoga. And you don't have to go to a third party studio. You can do yoga right in the comfort of your own home. Dance, especially trance dance. We talked about that last month. Skydiving, that's not for everyone. Maddie and Lainey have done the skydiving, the indoor skydiving. I can't bring myself to do it. I'm sorry. Sitting outside on a windy day and just listening to music, going for a hot air balloon ride, hiking up a mountain and really appreciating the change in the air and atmosphere as you get higher up. Starting your day with positive affirmations. Everybody should be doing that. When you wake up, that is a prime time to set the theme of energy for the day, to set the vibration for the day. So in that first 15 to 30 minutes of being awake, get your coffee, sit down and state your positive affirmations for the day. Get that energy going. Inhaling deep the beautiful scent of flowers, or your favorite meal. Again, the sense of smell, your olfactory senses. That triggers the ability to manifest your air magic. Reducing the ways we contribute to air pollution. We all contribute to different negative things, right? Air pollution is one of them. It's kind of hard to get around it, but we can minimize it. We can try to reduce the ways that we contribute to that. Boy, it is dry in here. I hope I'm not going to lose my voice. I'm sorry, you guys. Today's a little bit of an off day for me, but let's talk about another aspect of work in Euturpe's wheelhouse, which is energy healing. Um, so energy healing, it's a form of energy medicine. In almost all belief systems, there is, the understanding that there is a vital life force that flows through our body. And energy healers, work to balance that energy, to promote physical or emotional healing, spiritual healing, using a variety of techniques that go by a variety of names, but they're all pretty much the same. Okay, so no matter what name we're going to give it, it is energy healing. So a vital energy like prana, flows through all of us, and imbalances do cause illness, from our five corners of health. That could be spiritual. I talk about that a lot because I personally do soul retrieval and fragmentation work for clients. There's the emotional and mental capacities, physical and sexual. There can be fragmentation there that requires energetic healing or restoration work. So it is healing involves restoring flow of that vital life force. So depending on the practitioner you work with, or if you're working with Euturpe directly, it can be hands-on, hands-off, distance techniques. I do a lot of distance techniques, but I also do hands-on. I used to have a soul retrieval studio back in Racine. All that stuff is in storage now. I was hoping to do a brick and mortar space here in the Twin Cities. I'm just not there yet. But this is to clear blockages, promote relaxation. EFT tapping, I have a whole list here that you guys can jump into and look into. But when I think of Euterpe as a muse, as a Greco-Roman deity, I always associate her in the energy healing world to EFT tapping. Okay. I don't know why that is, but EFT is basically tapping on meridian points to release emotional stress. And when I've looked at her in different art depictions, when I've read about her, I've studied her, for whatever reason, this seems to be like her biggest. I mean, I think, is associated to all of them, but for EFT tapping, somehow, like that is all her. I feel like if that is a form that you use in your energy healing, like that is 100% Euterpe channeling through. And that is probably my favorite form of energy healing is EFT tapping. I do use that in my hands-on soul retrieval work. Obviously, when I do the distance casting, I'm using sacred fire and compounding. But if you're a practitioner that puts hands-on, try this. Try the EFT tapping. See how you feel about it. I have seen it do amazing things in the realm of soul retrieval or fragmentation clearance. So it's just something to think about. It is in Euterpe's wheelhouse. So if you are a Hellenic pagan, if you walk a Hellenic path or a Hellenismo path, this might be something that works very, very well for you because of that association. All right. Oof, I gotta take some coffee, you guys. All right, let's talk about clairaudience. This is associated to Euterpe. It's in her wheelhouse. 8 signs you might be clairaudient. I found this when I was Google searching some images I could use for the presentation, and I thought it was cute. Ringing sounds in your ears are common. Feeling inspiration flow through you like out of nowhere, like you get Pam, like a semi truck of inspiration. Sometimes that is a sign. You talk to yourself. We all talk to ourselves, but if you talk to yourself a lot, you could be clairaudient. Hearing those high pitched noises. Again, we talked about ringing sound. We're going to talk about noises in general as I dive into this. If you're sensitive to music, if music triggers an emotional response that seems very extreme, if you had an imaginary friend when you were a child, and you're going to find that to be true with most of the clairs, but also with clairaudience, a lot of us had imaginary friends as children. You're a natural advice giver, you seek serenity. These are all signs of really honestly all the clairs, but definitely clairaudience. And I want to dive into clairaudience a little bit more deeply. So, Euturpe is associated with clairaudience very specifically. So, clairaudience is from the French term clear hearing. It is a psychic ability to hear sounds, voices, or messages beyond our normal physical perception. And oftentimes is from spirits, guides, other dimensions, manifesting as an inner voice, as music, or sudden sounds not heard by other people. So it is considered the auditory equivalent of clairvoyance, which is clear seeing. It's a form of intuition where information is received through the sense of hearing, distinct from ordinary hearing, and involves spiritual or paranormal communication. So, hearing voices, receiving messages or guidance from spirits, angels, deceased loved ones, transient spirits, inner knowing, hearing quote unquote thoughts or knowledge that isn't your own, often feeling like an inner voice or monologue, sounds beyond the normal range. So, hearing music, tone, sounds that aren't physically present. And of course, the other thing we don't talk about a whole lot that falls into clairaudience is telepathic communication. So, receiving thoughts from others mentally, either with them intentionally projecting it or unintentionally projecting it, right? So, that does fall into clairaudience. How it's experienced, again, it's a little bit different for everybody. When the girls, Madison and Lainey, they do protective meditations and they do door opening meditations. And if you've ever sat in on one of our spirit communication groups, we haven't done one for a while, but back in the day, there were a couple different methods that we used. And I forget the names of them now, but one of them did involve, both methods involve blackouts, either blackout blindfolds, or there were these goggles that Maddie used specifically. They were red light goggles that triggered different alpha and theta brain responses. So there was flashing lights. You would keep your eyes closed. It flashes through your closed eyelids. That brings your brain into different theta and alpha states to help you with your clairaudience, to open the door, so to speak. Um, we have used also additionally spirit boxes, so that those messages could come through a little bit more clearly. So there's lots of ways you can tap into your clairaudience, but how it's experienced, it's usually clear, distinct voices, like somebody speaking to you, but only you hear it. It could be sudden, unexplained sounds like ringing in the ears, whistling, or other noises. Feeling like you're talking to yourself. This is often a sign of a developing clairaudience. Having a conversation with yourself and then realizing, who the hell am I talking to? Musicality, a strong connection to music or hearing music not playing. I think, with Maddie specifically, um, I seen some telltale signs in her early childhood. Maddie played every instrument known to man. Yeah, she had a drum set when she was little. She played jazz sax, I think, for 3 years in middle school. Um, oh gosh, what else did she had so many different instruments she tried. I played cello professionally for many years. Um, Madison also was in performance arts. She's very tightly connected to the muses. Lainey loves the muses, but she's not anywhere as near as connected as Madison is, because Madison was in different choruses. She competed, so there was singing, there was musical instruments, there was acting on stage. So with Maddie, I seen that strong connection to music at a very young age. I think she was 5, when we kind of were like, hey, what's going on with this? So hearing music when it's not playing is a big one. That has happened to me a few times, and I don't consider myself clairaudience. I'm more claircognizant. But that's a big one, that if you are coming into this power, this ability, if you're working intentionally to develop it, that's kind of like a flag, like, hey, you're doing it right. Here it comes. So that's how it's experienced. How it differs from ordinary hearing. So source, of course, comes from a psychic or spiritual realm. It's not a physical vibration. Clarity. It's often clearer and more direct than internal monologue. Context. It can provide specific guidance or knowledge unavailable through normal senses. So that's how it differs. Whew. All right, you guys, let's jump into music. So I love using music and spell work. And so these are some old sheet music I put up here for you. The Witch's Dance and a spell to bring lost creatures home, specifically pets. And it is a musical spell. So I put this here for you guys to have for your records. You know, you can screenshot it or use your snippet tool and save it. I think music speaks to all of us. So music is, probably very easy for almost all of us to use. Whereas other, aspects can be a little bit more complicated if you're having to figure out like herbs and roots and, astrology. So this is one that really speaks to, I think, almost everybody on every single level, for a personal practice and is for, for third party, casting. All right. Using music and spell work. This usually involves choosing songs that match your intent to amplify that energy, to help you focus, and to create really a powerful atmosphere by aligning lyrics, rhythm, or even creating personal chants. Making music really a potent tool to raise vibrations and channel intention into the spell for manifestation. So, how to use it? So you can use it to set the mood, to raise energy. You can play music that really evokes the feelings needed for your spell. Upbeat for prosperity, intense for protection, calming if maybe it's for divination. You can match the intent to lyrics. Selecting songs with words, sacred words that directly relate to your goal, like money, 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 money. That's everybody uses the money song for, wealth. Love songs for romance. I use a lot of love songs. There are a variety of artists I use. Some of my favorites are Enigma, um, Enya, Tangerine Dream. Um, oh gosh. Oh, I can't think of his name. His last name's Malone. Is it Donnie or Danny Malone? I have to look. Blue October. Anyways, there's a lot of different music out there I like classical music too. But anything that really gets you into, that space energetically. So I would create, personal chants or songs, maybe song lists. You can adapt existing melodies, or create your own. You can create your own from powerful lyrics or mantras that resonate with you, singing and chanting them during your rituals. Incorporating rhythmic tools, using drums, bells, singing bowls to create hypnotic rhythms that shift consciousness and build power, especially if you're doing a lot of shamanic type work. And I've talked about this. I have a couple of presentations on YouTube. One is from our Sacred Sexuality series where I do talk about shamanism, in a deep dive. But I have, singing bowls here. I have drums. I have turtle shells. I have a lot of different things I use in my personal rituals or as a third party caster. And I think those things really do help bring in the right frequency, attract and solicit the right supports from a deidal or ancestral or even transient spirit, aspect. And they're very complementary. So, if this is something that, I always say, try it once, get a little singing bowl. You don't have to go spend a ton of money. See how you feel about incorporating that. And, water magic, we talked about air magic. I use singing bowls for water magic. I use turtle shells and, leather drums for air magic. So, and it's different. I'm not saying you have to do that for your practice, but that's what works for mine. All right. Let's see what else we got here. All right, so you can use music to charge objects, using sound waves from instruments or singing to charge things like crystals, herbs, any kind of spell components that you need to be energetically kind of at a certain functionality or level or frequency, vibrating at a certain frequency for your work. You can use it as a timer for focus. Playing, musical tracks or specific frequencies like theta waves for divination, to guide your meditation and focus without lyrical distraction. So, using music as a timer, for focus, I would suggest, like something like Tangerine Dream, where there are no lyrics, it's just melody, it's just music. That really, for me, works very, very well. Types of music to use, you can use specific artists, or genres. Maybe you like heavy metal for protection. Maybe you like classical or ambient music for focus. Or maybe you like traditional folk music for, the ancient type vibes, right? If you're working with ancestors. Instrumentals, Tangerine Dream, I brought up. Movie soundtracks or ambient music can provide a lot of atmosphere without the distraction of lyrics. And then chants, ancient chants, modern devotional songs like the Orphic hymns connect directly to spirit. So you can use those as well in your musical manifestation. All right, tips for success. Let me move my box a little bit here. Personal resonance is key. That's for everything in magic, you guys. It has to resonate with you on a personal level. You can't force things. Not everything is going to be in your wheelhouse. You have to find what works for you. Music needs to move you and help you feel the magic. And if it's not, don't use it. Silence versus sound. Decide if recorded music distracts you or if you prefer maybe something live, like, if you work with a coven, maybe you need a live drummer, or maybe it's just sitting out in nature and having natural sounds in the background, birds chirping. Find what works for you. It's different for all of us. Integrate actions, time actions like lighting your candles to specific parts of the song to kind of weave together your ritual, right? You can time things out when you use music, which I like. Ritual cues, so when we're using music and magic, I want you to think of them as ritual cues too. So noises are conscious triggers, right? So I don't think spirit obviously needs any sort of cue, but we as humans and our brains certainly do. So using sound, it can trigger an almost instantaneous jump to an alpha state, like in yoga. It just needs to be the same type of sound each time. So try it and see. This is like called conditioning. Back in psych, when I took psychology, my first year or two, we did a deep dive in conditioning. And we do condition to many, many different things. And sound and music can condition us to jump, operating states from a theta alpha level. So you could actually train yourself to, with a certain song or certain noises, to kind of make a jump into where your vibration is. But it does take work, it does take practice, but I'm just kind of throwing it out there as something that you can incorporate in your practice. Oh, excuse me. I gotta take another. My coffee is getting cold. I think that's the problem. Hang on. Hmm. All right. Diagnostics. This wind is insane. I'm sorry if I seem distracted today. I am distracted and I apologize, but this wind is not stopping. My windows are literally shaking. And I think to myself, okay, I'm on the 21st floor. If these windows get blown out or I get sucked out, man, how horrible would that be? It's not going to happen, but holy cow, the visual. Anyway, diagnostics. So you can use sound as a diagnostic tool to trace out parts of the body that require healing or parts of a room that require cleansing. You can just grab, like, I'm using a bell, for example, and start ringing it over somebody's body. Okay, I want you, actually, try this. I want you to try this if you can, if you have a willing participant. Grab a bell, start ringing it over somebody's body. Very similar to the concept of a body scan performed by many energy healers. So you might be naturally drawn toward one particular area of that person's body that might be suffering from a disease or an issue. So what will happen is, as you're ringing this bell over their body, you are going to notice a change. The sound of the bell is going to change when it's positioned over the part of the body that requires healing. The ringing might suddenly become louder or softer or sound more hollow, but you as the practitioner are going to be, you're going to notice it, whereas somebody else might not. But try this because it's real. So you can use music, sound as a diagnostic tool. And the most common use of that I see is with energy healing. So in soul retrieval, what we do is we have you laid out on a massage table, basically, very, very comfortable. We might be doing a couple of frequencies. We probably have a lot of frequency pads on you, and we're probably pumping energy into you. But what we'll do, me or Madison, is while that's happening, while you're going through, you're going to have, you're going to be actually going through a session with, I don't want to get into what it all is. Anyways, the point is, me or Madison, We're usually walking around the table, and we may have a drum, a turtle shell, we may have bells, we may have a variety of things, but we are looking for disruptions in frequency or flow. So if energy is not flowing in and flowing out properly, there will be a change in the sound that is made. And that's how we can kind of fine tune and figure out what's going on with that person. So this really does work. Give it a try. You'd be surprised. Charging, again, you can charge anything with sound. The next time you're kind of charging a crystal, making some incense, doing some simple candle magic, try using this as a technique. Just place the object in front of you and make some noise. Ring a bell or a singing bowl, sing to the object, play an instrument, beat a drum, and just imagine those sound waves carrying that energetic current, because they are, into that object. So you might be surprised at how much power you generate. I actually put things inside my singing bowls to charge them. I use orgone plates to charge. I actually have a frequency machine. I can set the specific frequency and charge an item that way. But again, you can use simple things, anything that makes sound, music, charge it to a love song if it's a rose quartz, whatever you're using it for. These are just some ideas to keep it simple for all of you to maybe incorporate a Euturpe type practice in your own personal world. Oh my goodness, where am I here? Okay, here we go. Um, Also with music, asking spirit for an impromptu song or chant. This one is kind of like mixing channeling with a bit of improvisation and performance, which is very much like muse-like, right? Working with the muses. So it might take some experimentation and practice to get down, but it can be extremely powerful. There's not always a perfect chant for every ritual. Sometimes you just have to open yourself up to spirit and ask for words or sounds. It might at the time seem completely nonsensical, and you might not even remember it once your magic is done or your spell is cast, and that's okay. So I do use this technique frequently, and let me explain to you why. So in runic magic, and this is not my normal wheelhouse. Runic magic is kind of outside my wheelhouse. I do incorporate it for certain things, for certain aspects, but that's more Briggs' wheelhouse, right? And because we work with Brig at White Dragon Healing, we do, do what we need to do on our end, right? So with the ruins, there's energy work called Galder. And if you look it up, if you study it, there are very specific formulas of sounds that you need to use. Um, and it sounds like meaningless gibberish. It's making these noises like foo, fa, fee, like um, I can never remember. Here's the honest to God truth, you guys. I can never remember those formulas. So when I'm, I'll look at somebody and I'll smile and be like, listen, I need the formula in front of me or we're going to have a problem. So what you can do, what I do when I need to, is I just take the speech sound, like the th sound, the phnome, whatever you want to, associated with that rune, and I surround it with different vowels or consonant sounds depending on what feels right in that moment for that ritual or spell. So it might sound something like fa, fa, fi, fi, it might sound very different than what the formula is. Um, Again, it's going to be totally nonsensical, but it is more driven by spirit or my higher self than the simple memorization and recitation of a formula. Um, Obviously, my Norse pagans are going to be like, Michelle, you can't do that. And maybe you're right for your practice. That is, it has to be Galder, right? But for me, I have a hard time remembering formulas that are sound based. And if you want to incorporate sound and you are, a neo pagan or you have some Norse, um, in your practice, if you struggle with these sound formulas, wing it with spirit. Wing it with spirit is that's my advice. If you talk to Brig, he'll slap my hand and then he'll tell you, don't listen to Michelle. But I'm just saying, I think it works for me. It can work for you. It's an option. I'm throwing it out there. All right, musical scrying. You could also call it like playlist scrying. I actually have a deck. It is a song lyric deck, and I do this. It's on my main site. I once or twice a year somebody will purchase a song lyric divination, And that entire deck is just different songs, and it is a divinatory tool. Music is very divinatory. Sometimes back in the day, I would ask my spirit guides, or deity around me, if they could give me a message through song lyrics. And, then I'd turn on my radio and I would hear what would be playing. Um, so, you can make a giant playlist. You can use, a radio station. Maybe you hit skip 4 times, after you ask for divine messaging, or hit the random button and just pay attention to what you hear. But there is such a thing as musical scrying. Um, the other thing that fits in with music and magic is the vibration of divine names. I didn't want to get too carried away with this because I'm doing my Banned from the Bible series part 2 tomorrow. And I'm already having to talk about this. So, this is one of my favorites. You can vibrate or intone divine names or words of power. So, you're going to see that type of technique described in many texts on ceremonial magic, the old grimoires, even in common rituals like the LBRP. So, that is very common, especially in old Christian magic when we're working with Yahweh, Adonai, Tetragrammaton. There is a very specific vibration with those names, and that is part of music or sound or ear magic. So that's just another avenue for you to maybe incorporate or look into, and incorporating into your practice. All you really need to do is find your own personal resonance frequency. So that is the pitch at which your voice causes your body to actually rumble or vibrate. So it's different for everyone because there's thousands of different things that attribute to our voices, our vocal cord size, our throat length, the exact structure of our larynx, our pharynx, nasal passages. All these things play a part. But it's usually somewhere in your lower register, right? So if you want to give it a try, the next time you're by yourself for a few minutes, try intoning the word Ra or Ram while focusing on your solar plexus chakra. This is what's called a seed sound, and it qualifies as a word of power. So you should use one full breath for every recitation of the word, and it should sound booming. So, intonation is also sometimes called the great voice or the magical voice. You'll see that in many, many different practices, but especially Norse pagan, you'll see that especially in that practice. We're just talking about Galder, that's a big one. The great voice, the magical voice is used in that. But practice, find your vibration, find your resonance frequency. Like I don't want to get into it because like my voice is crackly, but listen, you get the idea, right? You get the idea. You need to pull it through your solar plexus, right? Find it. When you start finding the rumble, the vibration, that is your personal resonance frequency. That is the tone that you're going to use with using sacred words to manifest, or sacred music or sound to manifest with your voice. So, it's something, again, research it. It's part of Euturpe's wheelhouse. It is part of, it's just another manifestation tool, you guys. Each month when I do these videos, I just want to fill your toolbox of different things that might or might not work for you. And you can pick and choose what you want to use or what you want to, throw back in the big box, right? So this is another one of those. It also feels good sometimes too to do those really deep Galder, vibrations. It can feel really good. If you're recovering from bronchitis or something, it can help with that too. Anyway, performance. So I want to talk about performance as offering. Any type of performance, because we are talking about the muses, can be given as an offering to deity, provided it's done expressly with that intention. It can be as simple as reciting a quick chant. Again, Euturpe is chant, or writing a chant to a specific or a poem, honoring one of the deity, like Euturpe. Or it can be very complicated. You can write your own song, right? It can be as simple or as complex as you want it to be. Although it may feel more appropriate if the intended deity is some sort of patron of the arts, this does not need to be the case. Spirit connects with us through emotion, and creating any sort of joyful noise sound is a great way to connect back and say thank you, right? We're also not limited, of course, to only offering, things to a deity. It doesn't have to be just a deity. Songs can be written in gratitude to our ancestors, our guides, transient spirit, elementals, or really any other sort of spirit that you decide to work with in your practice. Again, drumming or chanting to raise energy, that's a big one, you guys, especially if you work in a group. You don't have to play in rhythm. You don't have to all sing in tune. All you have to do is really make noise. You know, this, I think people feel overwhelmed, like it's very complicated. Like you have to have a certain skill set, and you don't, you guys, you really don't. This is a very intuitive aspect to incorporate in your practice. Oh, that was it. Oh my gosh. Okay, well, thank you. Let me stop share on this. Okay, so that was Euturpe. Those are, music, chants, those are all part of her wheelhouse. I wanted to just give you just kind of a general overview of this muse. I think I've beat the muses' histories to death and the other, so I didn't jump too much into the siblings and the background and the gods because I've done that so much month after month. I thought this year, let me keep it simple. Let me just talk about what's in her wheelhouse, what you could incorporate, what are some ideas of incorporation to help you manifest your goals. Um, but yeah, that is Euterpe. I think we have one more muse left next month. I think it's Cleo, but I'm not sure. Let me double check. And then I'm looking for advice from all of you on my Patreon because all of you, no matter what paid subscription tier you're in, whether it's the $5 a month or $75 a month, are part of this series. And once we finish our last muse next month, I was thinking about shifting into something like a numerology series, or I'm really open to whatever you guys would like. I mean, what do you guys want to learn about? There's a lot that I do here, so maybe shoot me some ideas on what you would really love to learn about going into the next series. Other than that, stay magical, and I will talk to y'all soon.